stood barely 3 feet tall among her towering kinfolk, her silver-blue skin gleaming under the harsh twin suns of prime. While every other member of her species, reached heights of 8 to 10 feet with their elegant elongated limbs and graceful movements, remained stubbornly small. Her compact frame was considered a genetic aberration, a cruel joke played by nature on an otherwise perfect being. The council of elders gathered in the crystalline chamber high above the floating city of, their voices echoing with the musical quality that made speech sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Stood in the center of the circle, her head held high despite the weight of their collective disappointment pressing down on her shoulders. Of the House of Whispered Storms, Elder spoke, her voice carrying the authority of 3 centuries of life. You have reached your 25th cycle, the age of choosing, yet your stature remains unchanged. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. In society, height was not merely a physical attribute but a measure of one's spiritual evolution, their connection to the cosmic energies that flowed through their advanced civilization. The tallest among them became leaders, scientists, artists, and philosophers. The shorter ones served in lesser roles, but none had ever been as diminutive as. I understand, Elder, replied, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hearts. Possessed 2 hearts, one for courage and one for wisdom, and both of hers beat rapidly now. Elder, whose height nearly touched the chamber's vaulted ceiling, leaned forward with something that might have been pity in his luminous purple eyes. Child, you possess intelligence beyond measure. Your scores in quantum mechanics, stellar navigation, and xenobiology surpass those of candidates twice your age. But our society has rules, traditions that have guided us for. Knew what was coming. She had prepared for this moment since childhood, when she first realized she would never grow to match her peers. While other young shot upward like the crystal spires of their cities, she remained trapped in her compact form, watching her dreams of joining the Stellar Academy or the Science Directorate crumble. You cannot serve in any official capacity, Elder continued, her tone softening slightly. Your stature prevents you from operating our vessels, which are designed for beings of proper proportion. Our technology, our architecture, our very way of life assumes a certain physical standard that you, unfortunately, cannot meet. The rejection was not personal malice, but institutional impossibility. Starships had control interfaces positioned 8 feet above the floor. Their laboratories required reaching distances that assumed long, elegant limbs. Even their housing was built with soaring ceilings and elevated platforms that made feel like a child in a world of giants. There is, however, an alternative, Elder said, producing a small crystalline device from his robes. The Exile Protocol. You would be given a small vessel, supplies for 1 solar cycle, and permission to seek your fortune among the lesser species of the galaxy. Many of our ancestors chose this path when they found themselves unable to contribute to society. The device glowed with soft blue light, containing the authorization codes that would grant her passage beyond space. It was a kind exile, cushioned with resources and technology far beyond what most species possessed, but exile nonetheless. Accepted the crystal, its cool surface warming in her small hands. I understand the wisdom of the council. If I cannot serve here, perhaps I can serve it by exploring what lies beyond our borders. The elders nodded approvingly at her grace in accepting banishment. They provided her with the research vessel Whispered Dawn, a sleek craft barely 50 feet long, equipped with advanced sensors, a quantum drive, and manufacturing systems that could produce whatever she might need from raw materials. The ship's interfaces had been hastily modified for her reduced stature, a final act of bureaucratic kindness. As performed the pre-flight checks in the cramped cockpit, her mentor Dr. Anis approached the airlock. The elderly scientist had been the only one to truly encourage her studies, seeing past her physical limitations to the brilliant mind within. Where will you go, young one? He asked, his voice heavy with regret. Pulled up the galactic charts on her display, pointing to a small yellow star in an unremarkable sector. Here, the locals call it Sol. There's a species there called humans. Their primitives really just achieved faster-than-light travel a few decades ago. But their development pattern is unusual, accelerated beyond what their age should allow. Humans, Anis mused. I've heard reports. They're short-lived but remarkably adaptable. What interests you about them? They're small, said simply. Smaller than anyway. If I'm going to be an outcast, perhaps I should find a place where being small isn't a disadvantage. The scientist placed one of his long-fingered hands on her shoulder, a gesture of blessing among their people. The cosmos is vast. Perhaps your journey will teach us all something about the true measure of worth. The whispered dawn lifted off from Prime with barely a whisper, its advanced drives producing no visible exhaust as it climbed toward the stars. Watched her shrink to a point of light, then disappear entirely as she engaged the quantum drive. The ship folded space around itself, transforming the vast distances between stars into manageable steps. During the 3-week journey to Sol system, immersed herself in everything the databases contained about humanity. The information was sparse and often contradictory, gathered mostly by long-range observations and intercepted communications. Humans appeared to be a remarkably diverse species, not just genetically but culturally, with hundreds of different nations, languages, and belief systems coexisting on their single world. Their technology was crude by standards, but showed creative applications that impressed her. They had developed nuclear power before mastering fusion, created global communication networks before achieving true artificial intelligence, and somehow managed to cooperate enough to build space stations and lunar colonies despite their fractured political landscape. Most intriguing were the reports of human adaptability. They lived in environments ranging from Arctic ice to tropical jungles, from mountain peaks to underground cities. Unlike who had evolved on a world of perfect climate and optimal conditions, humans seemed to thrive on adversity. The whispered dawn dropped out of quantum drive at the edge of Sol system, immediately detecting the electromagnetic chatter of human civilization. Radio signals, data transmissions, and the thermal signatures of thousands of spacecraft filled the local space. Was amazed by the sheer volume of activity around such a young star. She began monitoring their communications, her ship's translation systems working to decode human languages. Within hours, she was listening to everything from military transmissions to entertainment broadcasts, building a picture of a species unlike any she had encountered. Humans were indeed small by standards, averaging 5 to 6 feet in height. But more importantly, they seemed to value things other than physical stature. Their leaders were chosen for intelligence, charisma, or political skill rather than height. Their heroes came in all sizes, from towering athletes to diminutive scientists who unlocked the secrets of the universe. As she studied their society, felt something she hadn't experienced in years: hope. Here was a civilization that judged worth by achievement rather than appearance, that celebrated diversity rather than demanding conformity. But her observations were interrupted by the approach of human vessels. 3 sleek fighters with Earth Defense Force markings emerged from stealth, their pilots clearly aware of her presence despite her ship's advanced cloaking systems. A transmission crackled across the communication channels, spoken in clear galactic standard. "Unknown vessel, you are in restricted space. Identify yourself and state your intentions." Was impressed. Humanity had only encountered 2 other spacefaring species, the trade-oriented and the militaristic hegemony, yet they had already learned to communicate in the common tongue used throughout this galactic sector. She activated her ship's transmitter, her voice carrying across space for the first time as something other than a disappointment to her own kind. "This is aboard the research vessel Whispered Dawn. I seek an audience with human leadership to discuss potential scientific collaboration." The response came quickly: "Please follow our escort to Luna Station. Admiral will meet with you there." As the human fighters flanked her ship, guiding her toward the large space station orbiting Earth's moon, felt her 2 hearts beating in rhythm for the first time since childhood. She was no longer the outcast, the genetic aberration who couldn't contribute to society. Here, she might finally find a place where her true worth could shine through, where the brilliance of her mind mattered more than the limitations of her body. The blue-white sphere of Earth grew larger in her, a world of endless possibilities for someone ready to prove that greatness came in all sizes. The docking procedure at Luna Station revealed humanity's impressive engineering capabilities. The station was enormous, nearly the size of a small city, with rotating sections that provided artificial gravity and magnificent viewing ports that offered stunning vistas of Earth below. As her ship was guided into a docking bay, marveled at the diversity of vessels present. Human designs ranging from sleek military craft to bulky cargo haulers, alongside a few alien ships from the handful of species humanity had encountered. When the airlock cycled open, took her first breath of human-processed air. It carried unfamiliar scents, the metallic tang of advanced life support systems mixed with something organic, almost floral. A delegation waited for her in the docking bay, and she was struck immediately by their appearance. The humans were indeed smaller than, but they moved with a confidence and purpose that was entirely their own. Leading them was a woman with short gray hair and alert brown eyes, wearing a uniform adorned with insignia that evince limited knowledge of human military structure, identified as high rank. "I'm Admiral Sarah," the woman said, extending her hand in what recognized as a human greeting gesture. "Welcome to Luna Station. I have to admit we weren't expecting a visitor." Carefully took the offered hand, noting how the human's grip was firm despite her smaller stature. "Thank you, Admiral. I come seeking knowledge and perhaps the opportunity to share what I've learned." Admiral smiled, an expression that conveyed warmth in a way that features rarely could. "Well, you've certainly come to the right place for both. Shall we talk in my office? I'm curious about what brings a member of one of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations to our little corner of space." As they walked through the station's corridors, was struck by the human approach to design. Where architecture emphasized soaring heights and impossible elegance, human spaces were built for efficiency and comfort. The ceilings were proportioned for human height, the control panels positioned where human hands could easily reach them, and the walkways designed for human stride lengths. For the first time in her life, found herself in a space that seemed built for someone her size. Admiral's office was a compact space with large windows overlooking Earth. The walls were covered with images of human achievements in space, from the first crewed rockets to the gleaming vessels that now patrolled the outer system. Gestured to a chair that was perfectly sized for another small detail that spoke to human adaptability. "Coffee?" asked, producing a steaming mug from a dispenser. "I should warn you, it's something of an acquired taste for non-humans." Accepted the drink, inhaling the rich aroma. Her first sip revealed a complex flavor, bitter and energizing, unlike anything in cuisine. "It's intense, but pleasant." "That's humanity in a nutshell," said with a laugh. "Intense but pleasant once you get used to us. Now what can Earth do for a scientist?" The question hung in the air, and for a moment struggled with how to answer. She could hardly admit that she was an exile, cast out by her own people for physical inadequacy. Instead, she chose a version of the truth. "I'm conducting independent research into species adaptation and technological development. Humanity's rapid advancement, despite your relatively recent emergence as a spacefaring civilization, is remarkable. I hope to study your methods, perhaps find ways to apply human innovations to galactic challenges." Leaned back in her chair, studying with intelligent eyes. "Independent research, that suggests you're not here on official business." The Admiral's perceptiveness was unsettling. Humans, it seemed, were skilled at reading between the lines, a necessity for a species that relied on cooperation despite their diversity. "No," admitted, "this is a personal project." "Good," said, surprising her. "Official diplomatic contact tends to be stuffy and full of protocol. Personal projects are where the real discoveries happen. Tell me, what's your specialty?" "Quantum mechanics, stellar engineering, and xenobiology," replied. "I've all studied terraforming techniques and space-time manipulation theory." Whistled, a soft sound that somehow conveyed impressed admiration. "That's quite a resume. I think you'll find our research teams very interested in collaboration. But first, would you like a tour of our facilities? See what these primitives have accomplished." The tour revealed humanity's remarkable ingenuity. Luna Station wasn't just a military outpost, but a thriving research facility, manufacturing center, and gateway to the outer system. The humans had taken their home moon and transformed it into a hub of activity, mining operations extracting rare minerals while laboratories pushed the boundaries of human knowledge. In the materials science lab, Dr. James Park showed humanity's approach to metallurgy. Where had developed advanced composites through careful molecular manipulation, humans had achieved similar results through what could only be described as controlled chaos. They subjected materials to extreme conditions, forced chemical bonds that shouldn't exist, and somehow produced alloys that performed beyond theoretical predictions. "We call it brute force engineering," Dr. Park explained with evident pride. "If something doesn't work the elegant way, we hit it with a bigger hammer until it does." The phrase was puzzling until translator provided context. Humans, it seemed, valued direct action over theoretical perfection. They would rather build something that worked imperfectly than spend decades perfecting something that might never be built at all. In the astrophysics department, Dr. Maria Santos demonstrated humanity's approach to space travel. Their faster-than-light drive was crude compared to quantum-fold technology, but it was also remarkably robust. Where drives required perfect calibration and optimal conditions, human drives could function even when damaged, running on backup systems and emergency protocols that somehow managed to bend spacetime through sheer determination. The hegemony told us our drive design was impossible, Dr. Santos said with a grin. Too unstable, too dangerous, too likely to explode spectacularly. But it gets us where we need to go, and it saved more than a few ships when the fancy alien tech failed. But it was in the biotechnology lab that truly understood what made humanity special. Doctor showed her humanity's approach to genetic diversity, medical treatment, and adaptation enhancement. Where other species sought to eliminate genetic variation in favor of optimal forms, humans celebrated it. Every human genome tells a story, Doctor explained, displaying holographic genetic maps. We've got people adapted for high altitude, extreme cold, underwater environments, low gravity, high radiation. Our ancestors spread across every environment Earth offered, and each group developed unique advantages. Studied the genetic displays with growing amazement. Humanity wasn't a single species, but rather a collection of adapted variants, each one specialized for different challenges. Their diversity wasn't a weakness but a strength, allowing them to thrive in conditions that would destroy a more uniform species. But how do you maintain social cohesion? Asked. Society is stable because we're all fundamentally similar. With such genetic diversity, how do you avoid fragmentation? Doctor smiled, the expression carrying deep warmth. That's the beautiful thing about humans. Our genetics may be diverse, but our values tend to converge. We've learned that what matters isn't what you look like or where you came from, but what you choose to do with your life. The words hit like a physical blow, realization washing over her in waves. Here was a species that had solved the problem that had made her an outcast on her own world. Humans had learned to look beyond physical characteristics to see the worth of the individual within. As the tour continued, met humans from every conceivable background. Tall and short, dark and light, some bearing obvious genetic modifications for space travel, while others maintained the baseline human form. Yet they all worked together, their diverse perspectives and abilities combining to create something greater than the sum of its parts. Admiral found her in the observation lounge as the tour concluded, standing before the great windows that looked out over Earth. The blue-white planet turned slowly below them, its surface alive with lights that marked the presence of billions of humans living their lives in countless different ways. Overwhelming, isn't it? Said, joining her at the window. When I was young, I thought Earth was the whole universe. Then we discovered faster-than-light travel, met other species, saw how vast everything really is. It's enough to make you feel very small. Small, repeated, the word carrying new meaning. Among my people, small is synonymous with worthless. Here, I begin to think it might mean something else entirely. Turn to study her with those perceptive eyes. Want to tell me why you're really here? And please don't say independent research. I've been in the military long enough to recognize someone running from something. The directness was startling, but somehow liberating. Found herself telling the story she had never expected to share, beginning with her childhood realization that she would never grow to standards, and ending with her exile to seek purpose among the stars. Listened without judgment, occasionally asking clarifying questions but never expressing the pity that had feared. When the story concluded, the Admiral was quiet for a long moment, watching Earth turn below them. You know, finally said, humanity has a saying, good things come in small packages. We've learned that size isn't a measure of worth. Some of our greatest heroes, our most brilliant scientists, our most inspiring leaders have been people that others might overlook because of their physical appearance. She gestured toward the planet below. Down there, we have a man named Stephen who revolutionized our understanding of space and time despite being confined to a wheelchair. A woman named who discovered new elements despite facing discrimination for her gender. A man named Albert whose theories changed everything, despite being considered a failure in his youth. The names meant nothing too, but the message was clear. Humanity valued potential over appearance, contribution over conformity. I think, continued, That you're going to find humanity very welcoming to someone with your talents. The question is, what do you want to do with the opportunity? Looked out at Earth, at the lights of human civilization spreading across continents and oceans, and felt something stirring in her chest. Not just hope, but purpose. For the first time since leaving, she saw not just an escape from her past, but a path toward a future she had never dared imagine. I want to help, she said simply. I want to take everything I've learned, everything my people dismissed as worthless because it came in the wrong package, and use it to help humanity reach for the stars. Admiral smiled, extending her hand once again. Welcome to Earth, Doctor. I think you're going to fit right in. As took the offered hand, she realized that for the first time in her life, she truly felt at home. Not because she had found a place that would accept her despite her limitations, but because she had found a species that understood that true worth came from within, regardless of the package it arrived in. The stars beyond Earth's atmosphere beckoned with new possibilities, and once the outcast of prepared to help humanity claim its place among them. 6 months after her arrival at Luna Station, had become something of a celebrity among Earth's scientific community. Her integration into human society had proceeded faster than anyone expected, including herself. The Whispered Dawn now sat in a permanent berth at Luna Station, modified with human-built interfaces that somehow managed to blend elegance with human practicality. Doctor, as the humans had taken to calling her, split her time between 3 major projects. The first involved upgrading human faster-than-light drives with quantum folding technology. The second focused on developing new terraforming techniques that combined human adaptability with environmental manipulation. The third, and perhaps most important, was serving as humanity's unofficial ambassador to the growing galactic community. The morning alarm in her modest quarters aboard Luna Station woke her from dreams of soaring crystal spires and endless. These dreams had changed over the months, evolving from nostalgic memories to visions of new worlds where humans and aliens worked side by side, building something greater than either could achieve alone. Dressed quickly in the modified uniform that Admiral had designed for her, styling adapted for human manufacturing techniques. The result was surprisingly elegant, a garment that honored her heritage while proclaiming her new allegiance to Earth. Her first stop was the Quantum Mechanics Laboratory, where Dr. James Park and his team were conducting the morning test of the hybrid drive system. The prototype engine filled a chamber the size of a small building, its crystalline components glowing with soft blue light, while human-built power systems hummed with barely contained energy. "Good morning, Doctor," Park called out as she entered the chamber. "Ready to make history again." The enthusiasm in his voice never failed to amaze her. Scientific progress was measured in decades or centuries, approached with careful deliberation and extensive theoretical preparation. Humans, by contrast, seemed willing to rebuild reality every few months, throwing themselves into projects that would take her people generations to consider. "What's our target for today's test?" she asked, checking the readings on her handheld scanner. "We're attempting a fold jump of 50 light-years in a single step," Dr. Sarah announced from behind the main control console. "The theoretical calculations suggest it's possible, but the energy requirements are enormous." Nodded, reviewing the data streams flowing across her display. The hybrid drive combined space-folding mathematics with human brute force engineering in ways that violated every principle of elegant design her people cherished. Yet somehow, it worked better than either technology alone. "Energy levels look stable," she reported. "Quantum field generators are operating within normal parameters. I think we're ready." The test countdown proceeded with typical human efficiency. Where experiments involved lengthy rituals and ceremonial preparations, humans simply counted down from 10 and pressed the button. The drive engaged with a sound like distant thunder, and space twisted around the test chamber in ways that made its enhanced senses dizzy. For a moment that lasted an eternity, the prototype existed in 2 places at once, here in the laboratory and 50 light-years away near the system. Then reality snapped back into focus, and the readings confirmed what had barely dared hope. "Successful fold completion," announced, her voice tight with excitement. "Target coordinates achieved with 0.001% deviation. Energy efficiency increased by 37% over previous tests." The laboratory erupted in celebration, humans cheering and embracing in ways that would have scandalized researchers. found herself caught up in the moment, accepting congratulations and backslaps from colleagues who treated her not as an alien curiosity, but as an integral part of their team. Dr. Park pulled her aside as the celebration continued around them. "You realize what this means? We can now reach any star within 100 light-years in a single jump. The galaxy just got a lot smaller." She nodded, understanding the implications better than perhaps anyone else in the room. Humanity was on the verge of a technological breakthrough that would transform them from a minor species, confined to a single star system, into a major galactic power. And she had helped make it possible. "There's something else," Park continued, his expression growing serious. "Admiral wants to see you in her office. There's been a development." Made her way through the station's corridors, noting how completely she had adapted to human-scale architecture. The modifications to her quarters and workspace seemed almost quaint now, reminders of a life that felt increasingly distant. Admiral's office had been expanded since arrival, upgraded with holographic displays and communication equipment that kept Earth in constant contact with its growing fleet of exploration vessels. Herself looked tired, the weight of command evident in the lines around her eyes. "Thank you for coming," said, gesturing to the familiar chair across from her desk. "We've received a communication from the Galactic Trade Council. They want to meet with humanity officially to discuss our membership in the interstellar community." Felt her two hearts skip a beat. The Galactic Trade Council was the closest thing to a unified government that existed among the spacefaring species, a loose confederation that regulated commerce, diplomacy, and territorial disputes across thousands of worlds. "That's significant," she said carefully. "Membership in the Council is usually reserved for species that have achieved certain technological and social milestones. Humanity has only been spacefaring for a few decades." Smiled grimly. "That's what makes this interesting. According to the message, our recent technological developments have attracted attention at the highest levels. They want to send a delegation to Earth to evaluate our readiness for formal contact." A chill ran down spine as the implications became clear. The hybrid drive technology they had been developing would have drawn notice across the galaxy. If the Council was moving this quickly to establish contact, it meant other species were taking humanity very seriously indeed. "Admiral, there's something you need to understand about Council politics," began, choosing her words carefully. "Membership isn't just about technological capability. It's about finding your place in an established hierarchy. Most species spend centuries proving themselves worthy of acceptance." And prompted. "Humanity is advancing too quickly. You're disrupting the established order, challenging assumptions about how species should develop. That makes some Council members nervous, and nervous aliens can be dangerous." Leaned back in her chair, studying with those perceptive eyes. "You're worried about how your own people will react." It wasn't a question, and didn't treat it as one. They pride themselves on being the Council's senior scientific advisors. Our technology, our knowledge, our careful approach to progress have made us indispensable to galactic civilization. But if humanity continues developing at this pace, we'll make them obsolete, finished, and they won't appreciate that." The conversation was interrupted by an urgent chime from the communication system. Lieutenant Torres materialized as a hologram, his face tense with controlled urgency. "Admiral, we're detecting multiple spacecraft approaching the outer system. Configuration suggests they're Council vessels, but they weren't expected for another week." And exchanged glances before the Admiral responded. "How many ships, Lieutenant?" 15 vessels of various configurations, ma'am. The lead ship is broadcasting identification codes. They're requesting permission to approach Earth." Felt the blood drain from her face. 15 ships was not a diplomatic delegation, but a show of force. And the fact that we're leading it meant that the Council had decided humanity represented a threat that required immediate attention. "Patch me through to the lead vessel," ordered, her military training taking over. "And alert all defense platforms. We'll receive them peacefully, but I want our people ready for anything." The holographic display shimmered, resolving into the familiar tall, elegant form of a, but this was not one of the scientists or diplomats that might have expected. The being before them wore the formal robes of a High Arbiter, one of the Council's most senior enforcement officials. "I am High Arbiter of the Galactic Trade Council," the figure announced in perfectly modulated tones. We request immediate audience with the leadership of the human species and the exile of. Kept her expression neutral, though could see the tension in her posture. This is Admiral Sarah of the Earth Defense Force. You are welcome in our system, High Arbiter. However, we were expecting a much smaller delegation. Circumstances have required a more substantial response, replied coolly. Recent intelligence suggests that humanity has acquired advanced technologies through unauthorized channels. We are here to investigate these claims and ensure galactic security. The accusation hung in the air like a poison cloud. Realized with growing dread that the Council suspected exactly what had happened, that she had shared technology with a primitive species, violating countless protocols and treaties in the process. High Arbiter said carefully, all of our technological developments have been achieved through legitimate research and development. We've had some consultation with Doctor, but only in an advisory capacity. Turned his attention to, and she felt the full weight of disappointment pressing down on her once again. The exile will accompany us for debriefing. Her vessel will be impounded pending investigation. Any technology she has shared with humanity will be removed. Now wait just a minute, said, rising from her chair. Doctor is here voluntarily as a guest of Earth. She's committed no crime that we're aware of. She has violated the technology-sharing protocols established by the Council 3 ago, replied with icy precision. The penalty for such violations ranges from permanent exile to consciousness termination, depending on the severity of the breach. Felt her world spinning out of control. Everything she had built on Earth, every relationship she had formed, every contribution she had made was about to be erased by the same rigid thinking that had made her an outcast on. But Admiral stepped forward, placing herself physically between the holographic arbiter and, Doctor is under the protection of Earth. If you want to take her, you'll have to go through us first. The statement sent shockwaves through both the Council delegation and the human observers. Humanity was effectively declaring its intention to protect a Council exile against the combined might of galactic civilization. It was either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish, possibly both. Seemed genuinely surprised by the human response. Admiral, you cannot comprehend the forces you are challenging. The Council has maintained galactic peace for over 10,000 years. We will not allow a primitive species to disrupt that stability. Primitive's voice carried a dangerous edge that made even nervous. High Arbiter, I suggest you update your intelligence reports. Humanity may be young, but we've learned a few things about dealing with bullies. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving and alone in the suddenly quiet office. For a long moment, neither spoke, the weight of what had just happened settling over them like a shroud. Admiral said finally, you don't understand what you've just done. The Council has fleets that could reduce Earth to ash in hours. They have weapons that can make stars go supernova. Challenging them is suicide. Smiled, but there was no humor in the expression. You've been with us for 6 months. Haven't you figured out yet that humans don't know when to quit? She activated the station's emergency communication system, her voice echoing through every corridor and compartment. All personnel, this is Admiral. We are now at condition red. All leave is canceled. All defensive systems are to be brought online, and all research projects are hereby classified as highest priority. This is not a drill. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Through the office windows, could see human vessels launching from hidden bays throughout the Luna Station complex. Ships she hadn't known existed emerged from concealed positions throughout the Sol system, their crews scrambling to battle stations with practiced efficiency. Admiral, she said, amazement and terror warring in her voice, how many ships does humanity have? Consulted her tactical display, numbers scrolling across the screen faster than could follow. Publicly, about 50 vessels of various sizes. Actually, let's just say we've been busy little bees since we achieved faster-than-light travel. The display showed the true scope of human military preparation. Hundreds of vessels, from sleek fighters to massive battleships, formed defensive formations throughout the system. Hidden bases on asteroids and gas giant moons revealed themselves, their weapons charging with energy signatures that registered clearly on its enhanced senses. But this is impossible, she whispered. Your entire civilization is barely a century old in space. How could you have built so much so quickly? Smile became genuine for the first time since the crisis began. Let me tell you something about humans. When we're scared, we build. When we're threatened, we innovate. And when someone tells us we can't do something, we find a way to do it anyway just to prove them wrong. The tactical display updated again, showing the Council fleet moving deeper into Sol's system with deliberate precision. 15 ships against hundreds, but knew the math wasn't that simple. Each Council vessel was centuries more advanced than anything humanity possessed, capable of destroying entire fleets single-handedly. "What's the plan, Admiral?" she asked, though part of her didn't want to know. "Simple," replied, pulling up deployment orders on her screen. "We're going to show the Galactic Trade Council that humanity doesn't back down from a fight, and we're going to prove that sometimes the best things really do come in small packages." As alerts sounded throughout Luna Station and human vessels moved to intercept positions, realized that her exile from had led to something far more significant than she had ever imagined. She wasn't just witnessing humanity's first major test on the galactic stage. She was about to help them pass it. The communication system crackled to life again, this time carrying a transmission from the flagship of the human fleet. Captain Maria Santos, whom remembered from the astrophysics department, appeared on the screen wearing a crisp military uniform and an expression of determined confidence. "Admiral, the fleet is ready. All ships report weapons charged and defensive systems online. We're as ready as we're going to be." Nodded approvingly. "Outstanding work, Captain. Signal all ships we fight to protect our own, no matter what the cost." As the two fleets approached each other in the vast darkness between worlds, felt a strange sense of destiny settling over her. She had come to Earth as an outcast seeking acceptance, but now she stood at the center of a confrontation that would determine humanity's future in the galaxy. The Council ships were magnificent, their crystalline hulls reflecting starlight in patterns that spoke of ancient craftsmanship and overwhelming power. But the human fleet moved with a unity and purpose that reminded why she had chosen to make Earth her home. "Doctor," said quietly, "I need to ask you something. If this goes badly, if the Council decides to make an example of humanity, will you stay with us?" The question cut to the heart of everything had struggled with since leaving. She could return to her people now, claim she had been conducting legitimate research, perhaps even negotiate some form of clemency. Or she could stand with the species that had given her something her own people never had, the chance to prove her worth. "Admiral," she said, her voice stronger than she felt, "humanity gave me a home when my own species cast me out. You valued my mind when others saw only my limitations. If the Council wants to destroy that, they'll have to go through me too." Smiled, the expression carrying warmth that no face had ever shown her. "In that case, Doctor, let's show them what happens when you underestimate the power of small packages and big dreams." The first Council ship was now close enough for detailed scans, its sleek form bristling with weapons that could reduce Luna Station to cosmic dust. But around it, human vessels moved with the confidence of a species that had never learned to surrender, ready to prove that size wasn't the only measure of strength in the universe. As watched the fleets converge, she realized that her story had become something larger than personal redemption. She was about to witness the moment when humanity announced itself to the galaxy not as a junior member seeking acceptance, but as an equal partner demanding respect. The battle for Earth's future was about to begin, and for the first time in her life, knew exactly which side she was on. The standoff between the Council fleet and Earth's defenders lasted for 3 tense days, during which found herself at the center of the most complex diplomatic crisis the galaxy had seen in centuries. What had begun as a simple investigation into unauthorized technology transfer had evolved into a fundamental challenge to the established order of galactic civilization. High Arbiter had established his command center aboard his flagship, the Eternal Judgment, a massive vessel whose crystalline spires stretched for nearly 2 miles. From there, he directed increasingly frustrated attempts to resolve what he clearly viewed as an inexplicable human stubbornness in the face of overwhelming superior force. Stood in Luna Station's primary conference room, surrounded by Earth's top military and scientific leadership, as they prepared for what might be the final negotiation session. Admiral had insisted that she participate as both technical advisor and cultural interpreter, despite the obvious risks to her own safety. "The Council is growing impatient," reported Doctor, who had been monitoring alien communications. "Their fleet commanders are requesting permission to begin enforcement protocols." Admiral studied the tactical displays with the calm intensity that had made her Earth's foremost military leader. How much time do we have? Based on their communication patterns, I estimate 6 hours before they issue an ultimatum, replied, her enhanced senses picking up subtle stress indicators in the transmissions. After that, they'll likely begin with selective strikes to demonstrate their superiority. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the implications. Despite humanity's impressive military buildup, no one harbored illusions about their chances in a direct confrontation with Council forces. The alien vessels possessed weapons capable of cracking planetary crusts and defenses that could withstand the combined firepower of Earth's entire fleet. "There has to be another way," said Dr. James Park, packing nervously behind his chair. "We've proven that our technology works. We've demonstrated our peaceful intentions. Why won't they listen to reason?" Turned to face the assembled humans, seeing the confusion and frustration in their faces. They genuinely couldn't understand why their achievements had been met with threats rather than congratulations, why their eagerness to join galactic civilization had been interpreted as dangerous disruption. "Because," she said slowly, "the Council isn't afraid of your technology. They're afraid of what you represent." Admiral raised an eyebrow. "Explain." Moved to the central holographic display, calling up a map of known space that showed the territories controlled by various Council species. "Look at this carefully. Every major spacefaring species in the galaxy has followed essentially the same development pattern. Slow, careful expansion, gradually earning acceptance and integration into the existing power structure." She highlighted humanity's rapid expansion over the past few decades, a burst of activity that stood out starkly against the measured progress of other species. "You've compressed centuries of normal development into a few decades. You've achieved technological breakthroughs that should have taken you. Most importantly, you've done it without asking permission or following established protocols." Dr. Park frowned. "So they're angry because we didn't wait for an invitation." "They're terrified," corrected, "because you've proven their entire worldview wrong. The Council believes that rapid advancement leads to instability, that careful oversight is necessary to prevent younger species from destroying themselves or others. Your success challenges the fundamental assumptions that justify their authority." Admiral leaned back in her chair, understanding dawning in her eyes. "They're not trying to punish us for breaking rules. They're trying to protect their own power structure." "Exactly. If humanity can achieve in decades what others required centuries to accomplish, if you can innovate without Council guidance, then what purpose does the Council serve? Why should any species submit to their authority when they could follow your example instead?" The implications hung in the air like a weapon waiting to detonate. Humanity hadn't just developed faster-than-light travel and quantum manipulation technology. They had accidentally created a template for revolution that could reshape galactic civilization. "So what do we do?" asked Dr. Sarah, her voice tight with tension. "We can't undo our technological development, and we can't pretend to be less capable than we are." Before anyone could answer, the communication system activated with an urgent priority signal. Lieutenant Torres appeared on the screen, his face grave with concern. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the Hegemony fleet. They've just dropped out of hyperspace at the system's edge." The news hit the room like a physical blow. The Hegemony was the Council's military arm, a confederation of warrior species that served as enforcers for galactic law. Their arrival meant that High Arbiter had called for backup, escalating the situation beyond diplomatic crisis toward potential warfare. "How many ships?" asked, her training taking over despite the magnitude of the threat. 47 vessels, ma'am. Mixed configuration, but all military. They're holding position at the system's edge, waiting for orders." Felt her two hearts racing as she processed the tactical situation. 62 alien vessels against a few hundred human ships might seem like reasonable odds, but the technology gap made it essentially hopeless. Each Council ship could engage dozens of human vessels simultaneously, and the Hegemony fleet included specialized combat units designed to pacify entire star systems. "Admiral," she said urgently, "we need to contact them immediately. If the Hegemony receives authorization to begin enforcement operations, this entire system will become a battlefield." Nodded grimly. "Open a channel to the Eternal Judgment, full diplomatic protocols." The holographic display shimmered, resolving into the familiar form of High Arbiter. But now he was flanked by two hegemony commanders, their massive forms encased in the powered armor that marked them as elite warrior caste. The message was clear. Diplomacy was giving way to force. Admiral began without preamble. The situation has escalated beyond my authority to resolve peacefully. Fleet commander of the hegemony will now conduct enforcement operations unless immediate compliance is achieved. The larger of the two hegemony commanders stepped forward, his voice carrying the grinding authority of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. Humans, you have 30 minutes to surrender the exile and all technology derived from Council sources. Failure to comply will result in the systematic destruction of your space-based assets, followed by planetary bombardment until surrender is achieved. The ultimatum was delivered with mechanical precision, leaving no room for negotiation or misunderstanding. This was how the hegemony had maintained galactic order through overwhelming force applied with surgical efficiency. But Admiral surprised everyone, including with her response. Instead of capitulation or defiant rejection, she simply smiled. Fleet Commander, I appreciate your directness. However, before you begin enforcement operations, I'd like to make you aware of some recent developments that might interest you. His armored head tilted slightly, the gesture conveying puzzlement through layers of advanced technology. Explain. Gestured to Dr. Park, who activated a series of displays showing the hybrid drive test results from earlier that week. We've successfully integrated quantum mechanics with human engineering principles to create a faster-than-light system that exceeds the performance of either technology alone. This confirms the technology-sharing violation, interjected, but continued as if he hadn't spoken. More significantly, we've used this hybrid approach to develop defensive systems that you might find challenging to overcome. The statement hung in the air as tactical displays updated around the conference room. For the first time since the crisis began, saw something that gave her hope. The confident smile of humans who knew something their opponents didn't. Doctor said calmly, please demonstrate the defense grid. Sarah activated a control sequence that sent signals throughout the Sol system. Suddenly, space around Earth blazed with energy signatures as hundreds of previously invisible defensive platforms revealed themselves. Each one was small by Council standards, barely the size of a human fighter, but they moved with impossible coordination and generated energy readings that made even enhanced senses ache. Those platforms, explained to the stunned Council representatives, incorporate Doctor's quantum folding technology with human miniaturization and networking capabilities. Each one can generate localized space-time distortions that make them effectively immune to conventional weapons. More importantly, they're networked together in a way that creates overlapping defensive fields throughout the inner system. Fleet Commander studied the displays with the attention of a professional warrior evaluating an unexpected threat. This is unprecedented. Our intelligence indicated no such capability. Because we built it using principles your intelligence networks don't understand, replied. Doctor didn't just share technology with us. She helped us develop an entirely new approach to engineering that combines the best of both our species' capabilities. Watch the alien commanders processing this information, seeing the moment when their certainty began to crack. The Council had faced rebellious species before, primitives who had to be brought into line through superior firepower. They had never encountered a situation where the primitives had managed to match or exceed their own technological capabilities. Admiral said slowly, you are proposing that humanity has achieved technological parity with Council forces. I'm stating that humanity has achieved technological independence, corrected. We don't need Council oversight to develop responsibly. We don't need Council permission to innovate. And we don't need Council protection to defend ourselves. The words struck at the foundation of everything the Council represented. For 10,000 years, they had maintained galactic peace by ensuring that no single species could challenge their authority. The idea that a species barely a century old could achieve technological independence was antithetical to everything they believed about cosmic order. But Fleet Commander was a warrior first and a politician second. His attention focused on the tactical implications rather than the philosophical ones. These defensive platforms, how many do you have? Consulted her displays with theatrical precision. Currently active, about 1,500, In production, well, let's just say that human manufacturing capacity tends to surprise people. The number sent visible shockwaves through the Council delegation. 1,500 networked defensive platforms, each one potentially immune to conventional weapons, represented a defensive capability that could give even the hegemony pause. "This is unacceptable," declared, his carefully modulated voice cracking with frustration. "The Council cannot permit such unregulated technological development. It threatens the stability of galactic civilization." "Does it?" Doctor asked, stepping forward to address the alien commanders directly. "High Arbiter, Fleet Commander, with respect, how exactly does human technological advancement threaten galactic stability?" The question caught both aliens off guard. They were accustomed to making pronouncements about threats to galactic order without having to justify those assessments to the species being threatened. "Rapid technological advancement without proper oversight has historically led to catastrophic wars," replied, falling back on Council doctrine. "The Burning Stars conflict, the Silicon Uprising, all conflicts between species that were competing for limited resources or ideological dominance," Doctor interrupted. "Humanity has no territorial ambitions beyond our own system and no desire to impose our beliefs on other species. We simply want to be left alone to develop according to our own values." Found herself stepping forward, adding her voice to humanity's defense. "High Arbiter, I've lived among humans for months now. I've seen how they approach scientific development, how they balance innovation with responsibility. They're not the reckless primitives you fear." Turned his attention to her with the full weight of disappointment. "You have compromised your objectivity through emotional attachment to this species. Your testimony cannot be considered reliable." The dismissal stung, but it also crystallized something that had been building in his mind since the crisis began. She straightened to her full height, which was still dwarfed by the towering, but spoke with a voice that carried absolute conviction. "High Arbiter, I reject your assessment. My exile from was based on physical characteristics that were deemed incompatible with our society's standards. Here, among humans, I've been valued for my intellectual contributions rather than judged by my appearance. If that represents emotional compromise, then I embrace it gladly." The words sent ripples of shock through both the human observers and the Council delegation. A openly rejecting Council authority was unprecedented, particularly one who had already been officially exiled. But wasn't finished. "More importantly, you're missing the fundamental point. Humanity's rapid development isn't a threat to galactic stability because it's creating a new model for how species can interact. They're proving that cooperation between different types of beings can achieve things that neither could accomplish alone." She gestured to the defensive platforms still visible on the tactical displays. "Those platforms exist because human engineering was combined with theory. Neither species could have created them independently. Instead of seeing this as a violation of technology sharing protocols, you should be asking what other breakthroughs become possible when species work together as equals." Fleet Commander stepped forward, his massive form radiating controlled aggression. "Pretty words, Exile, but the reality remains that humanity has developed weapons capable of threatening Council forces. That cannot be permitted." "Why not?" Admiral asked, her voice carrying genuine curiosity. "Fleet Commander, your entire argument is based on the assumption that might makes right, that the Council maintains order through superior force. But what if there's a better way?" The alien warrior paused, clearly not expecting such a direct challenge to his worldview. The hegemony existed to project force, to maintain order through the threat of overwhelming retaliation. The idea that force might not be the ultimate arbiter was foreign to everything he understood. "Admiral," he said slowly, "you speak of alternatives, but you have built weapons to resist our authority. How is this different from the aggressive expansion that the Council exists to prevent?" Smiled, but there was steel beneath the warmth. "Because, Fleet Commander, we built these defenses to protect ourselves, not to conquer others. There's a fundamental difference between a sword and a shield, even when both are made of the same materials." The distinction resonated through the conference room as humans and aliens alike contemplated its implications. For the first time since the crisis began, sensed uncertainty in the Council representatives, a crack in their absolute certainty about the righteousness of their cause. Dr. James Park seized the moment to add his own perspective. High Arbiter, Fleet Commander, what if we could demonstrate that cooperation produces better results than domination? What if humanity's rapid development could benefit all Council species rather than threaten them? Elaborate, said, his tone suggesting skeptical interest. Park activated another series of displays, showing theoretical applications of hybrid human technology. The defensive platforms are just the beginning. We've identified dozens of areas where human and alien approaches could be combined to create breakthrough technologies. Medical systems that could extend across species. Environmental controls that could make marginal worlds habitable. Even weapons, if necessary, but designed for protection rather than conquest. The presentation continued for nearly an hour, outlining possibilities that ranged from practical improvements in daily life to revolutionary advances that could reshape galactic civilization. Throughout it all, watched the alien commanders' reactions, seeing the moment when their fear began to transform into something approaching wonder. Finally, Admiral stepped forward to make the closing argument. High Arbiter, Fleet Commander, you came here to investigate a violation of Council protocols. What you've discovered is something much more significant. Proof that the old ways of doing things aren't the only ways. Humanity offers the galaxy a choice between continuing the slow, careful development that has characterized the past 10, or embracing a new approach that could compress centuries of progress into decades. She gestured toward, including her in humanity's vision of the future. Doctor was exiled by her own species for being different, for not fitting into their predetermined categories. But here, among humans, her differences became strengths. Her unique perspective enabled breakthroughs that neither species could have achieved alone. The words hit their target with devastating precision. Every being in the room, human and alien alike, understood the deeper message. The Council's rigid hierarchies and predetermined roles were preventing exactly the kind of innovation that had made the human breakthrough possible. "What are you proposing?" asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Partnership," replied simply. "Not Council membership under existing protocols, but a new kind of relationship. Humanity remains independent but shares its innovations freely. We establish joint research facilities, cultural exchange programs, and cooperative defense arrangements. Instead of forcing us to conform to existing patterns, you allow us to demonstrate that diversity of approach strengthens everyone." Fleet Commander was silent for a long moment, his armored form motionless as he processed the implications. Finally, he spoke with the bluntness of a professional soldier. "Admiral, your proposal is unprecedented. It challenges fundamental assumptions about how galactic civilization should operate. The Council will require extensive deliberation before any such arrangement could be approved." "Of course," agreed. "But in the meantime, perhaps your fleets could stand down while those deliberations take place. As a gesture of good faith, we're prepared to share our defensive platform technology with Council security forces, demonstrating our commitment to galactic stability rather than disruption." The offer was a masterpiece of diplomatic strategy, addressing the aliens' security concerns while simultaneously proving humanity's peaceful intentions. More importantly, it gave the Council a face-saving way to withdraw their forces without appearing to back down. Watch the alien commanders exchange glances, seeing the moment when the crisis transformed from potential warfare into genuine negotiation. For the first time since the standoff began, she allowed herself to believe that humanity might actually survive its first major test on the galactic stage. 3 weeks later, stood in her laboratory aboard Luna Station, watching through the viewports as the combined Human Council research fleet prepared for departure. The crisis had indeed transformed into opportunity, with representatives from dozens of species joining the first truly cooperative scientific expedition in galactic history. The hybrid drive technology that had started as a simple improvement to human faster-than-light capability had become the foundation for a new age of cooperation. The defensive platforms that had nearly triggered a war were being installed around Council worlds as protection against the unknown threats that lurked in the galaxy's unexplored regions. Most importantly, the rigid hierarchies that had defined galactic civilization were beginning to give way to something more flexible, more inclusive, more human in its recognition that worth came from contribution rather than conformity. Admiral entered the laboratory, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the satisfied expression of someone who had just finished negotiating humanity's formal recognition as an independent galactic power. "Doctor," she said, offering one of the cups, "I have some news that might interest you." Accepted the coffee, inhaling the rich aroma that had become one of her favorite human innovations. "Good news, I hope." "The best," replied with a grin. "The Science Council has formally requested your return. Apparently, your work here has been so impressive that they're prepared to overlook the circumstances of your departure." The offer hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that went far beyond personal redemption. Could return to her home world not as an exile, but as a proven scientist whose contributions had reshaped galactic civilization. She would have access to resources and facilities that dwarfed anything available on Earth, opportunities to work with the most advanced minds of her generation. But as she looked out at the mixed fleet preparing to explore new worlds together, at the human researchers working alongside alien scientists in ways that would have been unthinkable just months ago, realized that her choice had already been made long ago. "Admiral," she said, raising her coffee cup in a gesture she had learned from her human colleagues, "please convey my appreciation to the Science Council for their generous offer. However, I must respectfully decline." Grin widened. "Any particular reason?" Turned back to the viewport, watching as human and alien vessels moved in perfect coordination toward the jump point that would carry them to destinations unknown. "Because, Admiral, I've finally found a place where being small doesn't make me less valuable, where being different is seen as an advantage rather than a defect, where the size of someone's contribution matters more than the size of their body." She paused, thinking of all the young humans she had met who reminded her of herself. Brilliant minds trapped in forms that others might underestimate, individuals who had learned to measure their worth by their achievements rather than their appearance. "Besides," she added with a smile that would have looked alien on, but felt perfectly natural here, "humanity is just getting started. Someone needs to make sure they don't get into too much trouble as they reshape the galaxy." Admiral laughed, the sound carrying the warmth and acceptance that had made Earth feel like home to an exiled alien scientist. "In that case, Doctor, welcome to the adventure of a lifetime." As the fleet engaged their hybrid drives and folded space around themselves, carrying the hopes and dreams of a dozen species toward new horizons, stood in her human-sized laboratory and smiled. She had been rejected by her species for her stature, but Earth had taught her that true worth was measured in ways that had nothing to do with height. The galaxy would never be the same again, and for the first time in her life was proud to be exactly who she was. Small in stature but infinite in possibility, a living bridge between worlds that proved greatness truly did come in all sizes. In the end, the greatest discovery wasn't faster-than-light travel or quantum manipulation technology. It was the simple truth that diversity of thought, experience, and perspective could achieve miracles that uniformity never could. And at the heart of that discovery was a small alien scientist who had learned that sometimes the most important revolutions began with a single individual willing to stand up and declare that different didn't mean lesser. The future stretched ahead of them, bright with possibilities that neither human nor alien could have imagined alone, but together might achieve beyond their wildest dreams.